The Ukrainian army is pulling back from Chasiv Yar. This small town has become a big deal in the ongoing war. Russian forces have been hammering it for months. Now, Ukrainian troops are leaving parts of the town. They had to abandon a neighborhood in the northeast. It was just too dangerous to stay there. The retreat is a tough decision for Ukraine. It means giving up ground they've fought hard to keep. But sometimes pulling back is the smart move in war. It helps save lives and resources. The Ukrainian commanders had to weigh the costs and benefits. They decided it wasn't worth the risk to keep holding that part of town. This isn't the first time Ukraine has had to retreat. Last year, they pulled out of Bakhmut. That was another key town nearby. These retreats are hard for morale, but they're part of the reality of this long, grueling war. The Ukrainian forces are trying to be strategic. They want to preserve their strength for future battles. The retreat from Chasiv Yar is a setback for Ukraine, but it's not the end of the fight. The war is fluid, with front lines shifting back and forth. Ukrainian leaders say they're regrouping. They're planning their next moves. The battle for Chasiv Yar isn't over yet, but this retreat shows how tough things are getting for Ukraine's defenders. Chasiv Yar might seem like just another small town, but its location makes it crucial in this war. It sits on high ground overlooking the surrounding area. This gives whoever holds it a big advantage. They can see enemy movements and direct artillery fire more effectively. That's why both sides want it so badly. International military expert, the town is also a key part of Ukraine's defensive line. It helps protect larger cities further west. Places like Kramatorsk and Sloviansk are important industrial centers. If Russia takes Chasiv Yar, those cities become more vulnerable. It would be a stepping stone for Russian forces to push deeper into Ukrainian territory. Chasiv Yar is also important for logistics. It's on a major road that Ukraine uses to supply its troops. If Russia captures the town, they could cut this supply line. That would make it much harder for Ukraine to keep fighting in this region. It's like cutting off a lifeline for the Ukrainian forces further east. International military expert, the battle for Chasiv Yar is part of a bigger picture. Russia is trying to take control of the entire Donetsk region. This area, along with neighboring Luhansk, makes up the Donbas. Russia has claimed these regions as its own, but Ukraine is fighting to keep them. Chasiv Yar is one piece in this larger struggle for control of eastern Ukraine. The fighting has taken a heavy toll on Chasiv Yar. Once a peaceful town of 12,000 people, it's now almost empty. Most residents have fled the constant shelling and gunfire. Those who stayed face daily danger. The streets are littered with rubble from destroyed buildings. Homes, schools and shops have been reduced to ruins. The destruction is everywhere. Ukrainian civilian Russian artillery has pounded the town relentlessly. Many buildings are just shells now, with roofs caved in and walls crumbling. The infrastructure is in shambles. There's often no electricity or running water. It's hard to imagine normal life ever returning here. The scale of rebuilding needed is enormous. The human cost is heartbreaking. Families have been torn apart. Some people left early in the war. Others stayed, hoping things would get better. Now most have been forced to leave their homes behind. They've become refugees in their own country. Many don't know if they'll ever be able to return. The few who remain live in constant fear. Ukrainian civilian. This destruction isn't just about buildings. It's about lives disrupted and dreams shattered. Children can't go to school. Businesses are closed. The community has been scattered. Even if the war ended tomorrow, it would take years to rebuild Chasiv Yar, and some scars, especially the emotional ones, may never fully heal. The town has become a symbol of the war's brutal impact on ordinary people.
Russia is using what military experts call scorched-earth tactics in Chasiv Yar. This means they're, destroying everything in their path. They're not just targeting military positions, they're leveling entire neighborhoods. The goal is to make the area uninhabitable. It's a cruel and devastating strategy. The Russians are burning everything. They're leaving nothing for the people who once lived there.
This approach isn't new. Russia has used it in other parts of Ukraine too. It's a way to demoralize the enemy and make holding territory impossible. These tactics have a long history in warfare. The name scorched earth comes from the practice of burning crops and buildings. The idea is to deny the enemy any resources. In modern warfare, it means destroying infrastructure. Power plants, water systems, and communication networks are all targets. It makes life unbearable for civilians.
The use of these tactics shows how brutal this war has become. It's not just about taking territory. It's about making that territory useless to the other side. This approach has been widely condemned. Many see it as a war crime. It causes immense suffering to civilians, and it makes post-war recovery much harder. The scars left by scorched earth tactics can last for generations.
Despite having more soldiers and equipment, Russia's progress in taking Chasiv Yar has been slow. This shows how determined Ukraine's defense has been. Ukrainian forces have dug in. They've used the terrain to their advantage. Every street and building becomes a potential stronghold. This kind of urban warfare is difficult and costly for the attacker. The slow pace also reveals problems in the Russian military. They've struggled with logistics and coordination. Their tactics often seem outdated. They rely heavily on artillery, but lack the precision of more modern forces. This approach causes massive destruction, but doesn't always lead to quick victories. It's a war of attrition, wearing down both sides.
For Ukraine, the challenge is different. Their resources are stretched thin. They're fighting along a long front line. Every soldier and every bullet counts. They've had to make tough choices about where to focus their efforts. Chasiv Yar is important, but it's just one of many battles they're fighting. Ukraine is also dealing with shortages of ammunition and equipment. The slow progress of the battle highlights a bigger issue. Both sides are struggling to make significant gains. The war has become a grinding stalemate in many areas. This puts enormous strain on both militaries and their supporting economies. It also tests the patience of international allies. The longer the war drags on, the harder it becomes to sustain the fight. Both sides are looking for a breakthrough, but it remains elusive.
As the battle for Chasiv Yar continues, Russia has opened another front in the war. They're targeting Ukraine's power infrastructure. Russian drones and missiles are hitting power plants and transmission lines. This causes widespread blackouts across Ukraine. Thousands of people are left without electricity, sometimes for days. These attacks are strategic. They aim to wear down Ukrainian resistance. By disrupting daily life, Russia hopes to break Ukraine's will to fight. It's also about creating chaos and fear. When the lights go out, everything becomes harder. Hospitals struggle to operate, businesses shut down, communication becomes difficult. It's a way of attacking the whole country, not just the front lines.
The timing of these attacks is crucial. As winter approaches, the threat becomes more serious. Ukraine's winters are harsh. Without power for heating, many people could face life-threatening conditions. The Ukrainian government is working to repair damage quickly, but the constant attacks make this a huge challenge. They're in a race against time and the weather.
Looking ahead, Ukraine faces a tough winter. The combination of ongoing battles like Chasiv Yar and attacks on infrastructure creates a perfect storm. International aid is crucial, but it's often slow to arrive. Ukraine needs air defense systems to protect its cities. It needs generators and repair equipment to keep the lights on. And it needs continued military support to hold the line against Russian advances. The coming months will test Ukraine's resilience like never before. The world watches, wondering how this conflict will evolve as the seasons change.